Hey guys, Edre here. Got a new haircut. I'm going to be reviewing the new Ozzy Osbourne album, Ordinary Man. Let me just say, going into this, if this was a few years ago, I probably would not have been too excited. But after hearing what Ozzy was up to last year, especially with the Post Malone song, which is probably my favorite of last year, as well as some of the singles he dropped, Under the Graveyard was probably my favorite, Straight to Hell was a banger, and then I think more recently Ordinary Man with Elton John, I wasn't as crazy about, but I thought it was a strong ballad. So needless to say, it felt like Ozzy was on top of his game, it felt like he was actually into it, and I was excited because most of his more recent material, with the Black Sabbath album 13, and some of the solo stuff he put out with, I think, Scream and that was around 10 years ago, I didn't think was too great. It felt very formulaic, it felt very much like what I expected Ozzy to do. But because he was working with younger producers, Andrew Watt, who I find to be one of the greatest producers in pop and rock out there today, and also working with Duff McKagan and Chad Smith instead of his usual group, especially like having Andrew Watt on guitar for the most part, rather than Zakk Wylde, kind of brought new life into this project, which definitely made me a good amount excited. And I gotta say, all my hopes that I wanted this thing to do were delivered. I think it's a very strong album. It was pretty much what I expected, but better in a way. Like, I was kind of getting a little nervous that maybe the singles are going to be the highlights and that the other stuff wasn't going to be so good. But I mean, for the most part, everything here is pretty good. And it starts off with Straight to Hell, the song we already heard, but I might as well talk about this since I haven't talked about it yet on my channel. Straight to Hell, good, like, headbanger song, I guess you could say. Vocally, he's great on this album, and it's really clear on this song. And musically, it's interesting. The production's good. It's definitely much more raw and muddy sounding compared to some of his more too clean works that he put out in the past, like 10, 20 years. The song All My Life is one of the highlights on this thing. Kind of starting off with a more dreamy guitar, and you think it's a little bit more of a ballad, but it kind of does really kick in really fast, and it really brings life to this project. And one thing I like is how songs like this, you could tell that he's taking a more internal look at his music, like looking more inwards when he's writing his lyrics, and he still has his more funny moments with the like demonic laughing and the sort of like gimmicky stuff, but that's part of the joy of Ozzy. So I feel like that's executed pretty well here. On Straight to Hell, you have the laughing, same here, and like the demonic sounds, but that's kind of what you expect, and it adds a more joyous, like more fun side of this album. Goodbye gives me a lot of Black Sabbath vibes. Between the drums and the guitar and just like the riff, that sounds like it's straight from the Black Sabbath playbook, but actually executed well, unlike the last Black Sabbath album. The song Ordinary Man is not one of my favorites. It's a piano-y ballad with Elton John. I'm not a huge Elton John fan to begin with, so it's not like I expected this thing to be fantastic. But for what it's worth, it's decent. And then Under the Graveyard, the following track I already talked about, one of my favorite singles of last year. Eat Me is interesting. That's an interesting song. I love the way it's very upfront, I guess you could say. Today is the End. I'm not too crazy about this one either. This one and Holy for Tonight, I find to be the two weakest songs probably on this album. Just because they do feel a bit more formulaic, like what I would expect from him, and they don't bring much new to the table, if you know what I'm saying? But Scary Little Green Men, that's interesting. I think of Bruno Parauznik. But yeah, Scary Little Green Men is kind of a fun one. It's definitely one of the more fun, like, I don't know, what's the word to describe it? It's good. I'm looking at the melody, man. The melody on this song is Scary Little Green Man. Da, da, da. And with like the guitar going synchronized. It's a perfect song for Ozzy, especially at this stage. And then the one song that I really think stood out the most on this album is It's a Raid. It's a Raid featuring the one and only Post Malone. Is an amazing like Circle Pit song, man. I can imagine I know he just canceled his tour, but I can imagine the crowd going crazy for this one. I think not only is the drums and the the pure instrumentation on this thing astounding. I think that both Ozzy and Post have fun on this song. You can tell they're enjoying it. The screaming, the laughing, just like the having fun, the interesting harmonies on the during like the chorus, and like Post Malone's just there, like, you know, messing around, and Ozzy at the end with like the little like screaming at the end. It's a fun song. This is the kind of stuff that I think Ozzy needs to do, because if you make everything formulaic and clean sounding, nothing really ever changes, and it's never that good. And I feel like this is a good change for him. And I think it's a bonus track, but Take What You Want is also on this thing at the very end. And for those who don't know already, Take What You Want is my favorite song of 2019. So I don't have anything really bad to say about that. I think Ozzy, Post, and Travis all bring a lot to the table for a good song. Now, I guess it's overall, in context, I think that the album is really good, considering where Ozzy's at, considering Ozzy's health. He has a lot of health issues lately. And it's nice to hear him be actually into a project and not just feel like he has to make a project. So I think Ozzy realizes that there's no point trying to make a commercial album when there really isn't much of a commercial audience for this kind of music in 2020. There just isn't. So that kind of opens the door for people like Ozzy to make more of the music that they've been wanting to make. And I hope more bands go down this route. I mean, Green Day needs to do this. A lot of these bands that have been around for at least 30 years need to do this. You're going to be making music, and it's not going to be charting because the style's just not in anymore. So don't try to make it hip. Just do what you want. And Ozzy did that perfectly here. This is a relatively shorter review than most of mine, but that's just because I don't know really what else to say. This is a really strong album, a strong comeback album for Ozzy. I don't know how much left he has in him. Production-wise, this thing is great. A lot of these songs give me very much early Black Sabbath vibes. I think some of the ballads as well as some of the more energetic songs all turn out really good on this album. Obviously, we already have heard the lead singles off this thing, but like even the deep cuts, like Scary Little Green Men, All My Life, and Goodbye are all some of the greatest Ozzy songs he's put out, honestly, in 25 years, probably since No More Tears. And I think this is his strongest album since No More Tears. Osmosis and a lot of the stuff that came out after that is definitely a lot weaker, I think, a lot more formulaic and tiring. But, you know, this thing, it's strong, it's fresh, you can tell he's into it, good track list, strong 8 out of 10. And that's pretty good for a late career album for really any artist. And this is probably the best late career album of really most artists that were around his era. I mean, the first Black Sabbath album came out 50 years ago, and he's still putting out strong music today. That's about it for now. Ozzy Osbourne, Ordinary Man, 8 out of 10.